It's a beautiful Sunday morning. It's a little warm today. The sun's already up high, and it's still, like I think it's not even 10 o'clock yet. And everything's so green and lush. We had a lot of rain, and so now the ground is still wet with rainwater from 2 days ago. And so everything is just really growing fast right now. The longest days of the year are right now, so all the plants are getting plenty of sunlight and plenty of rainwater, the two things they really need to grow. So it's like that jungle, and you can even feel the humidity and the moisture coming up off of the ground and out through the plants, because when these plants soak up water, they're also putting off moisture, or that moisture comes up through the leaves and then it evaporates off the leaves. It helps keep the leaves cool, and it puts a lot of moisture in the air, and it also helps get the ground dry. The plants move a lot of water from the ground up into the atmosphere, so it's called evapotranspiration. And anyhow, this green and everything is really, and sunlight is really good for us. But our body, we see more shades of green than we see shades of any other color, and green has a very special effect on the mind. And different shades of green say a lot to us, but generally speaking, when we're in an environment of these natural green colors, it has a natural calming effect on us. And when we look around the world and look to examples in our world around us of people who are cultures or groups of people that tend to have more happiness, so to speak, in their lives, is also usually associated with better overall health amongst those communities. So it's not the people, the movie stars and the people like that. In fact, that whole industry is largely built upon creating a sense of envy, or in us. In other words, religious philosophers consider envy to be a deadly sin. And so much of what we see that gets our attention and makes money is really meant to feed on the more negative parts of our nature, and which envy and those kinds of things. And that's not usually considered to be related to really genuine happiness. And the groups of people who typically do very well as a society and as families and throughout life on happiness are people that tend to have fairly consistent and strong practices and principles to their living. They tend to be quite close to nature, and they also tend to be oftentimes the groups of people that have longer lifespans and healthier lifespans. So like in the United States, the Amish tend to do very well as far as peaceful and low levels of mental stress and mental illness and that sort of thing. But also you can just see it amongst just certain families where they pass this kind of knowledge on from one generation to the next. And although genetics do play a role in these things, they're usually not as people often try to count too much to genetics. Just because something runs in a family doesn't mean it's genetic. It's a lot of it is learned. Human beings spend longer than any other creature on earth by far learning how to live and survive and to be social and cultural, and those lessons are passed on from one generation to the next, so they can stay in a family line for a very long period of time. And it's not necessarily because of genetics, or maybe genetics is a small component of it, but it just gets passed along. So it's not necessarily related to the fact that it's just in you and you can't get rid of it. It's because we teach it to one another. So it's very important for you to know that to be able to look at examples and to just know right off the bat that it's okay to be entertained and to have some enjoyment from the entertainment industry and that sort of thing, but do not make that your role model or role models, or or whatever for how to have a happy life. You gotta be able to know the difference between what's entertainment and what's, you know, stimulating our dopamine receptors and that sort of things in a short-term basis versus the things that are more permanent and real. And that's where, you know, if you have to look outside of your general surroundings, you know, look to those groups of people where the proof is in the pudding. The Greeks in Sardinia, in that area, not necessarily all Greeks necessarily, they're people just like everybody else, but the certain groups over there that also have long lives, they're known to have real low levels of stress and long lives and close family relationships and good levels of happiness and socialization, and all through the world. It's all through the United States too. You just got to look for the certain communities and places and people who don't over abuse substances and those kinds of things, and they have, you know, good social norms around them. There's great examples down in the South Pacific Islands of these families who have been living on these islands, you know, basically as these tight family groups for who knows how long, 1,000 years or some more, and they live very close lives, and they have very little violence and very little, you know, they don't use a lot of medicines and those kinds of things, and they're not rich, but they live a rich life. They're very close to one another, and they support one another, and they're not looking for all the shiny objects and those sorts of things. And it's not that you can't have those things, it's just that you don't want to look at those things as being the points of envy or that happiness is coming from that. You only want to have those things if your life is taking you in a direction to where you just can afford them. And if so, then you shouldn't feel guilty about having certain nice things, but you know, they're not going to be the source of your happiness. Your source of your happiness is between your ears. And so one of the most successful and famous people in the history of mankind, you know, Marcus Aurelius, amongst others, but he's a great example because he actually wrote about these things. He found it important enough to write a very important book called Meditations, and it survived where many other books, you know, were destroyed and through the history of time. But his book was found to be very, very useful and very important to people, and they replicated it and reproduced it, and so it survived, and now it's one of the most published books in the history of mankind is Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. But he could have had anything he wanted. He was the emperor of Rome, but he really made these points about where happiness lies, you know, and a lot of that comes back to a higher level of thinking and being grateful for everything. So if you can set your mind towards being grateful and gratitude, then the happiness will kind of flow behind that, and you will kind of create what you want to create. So you just know that you can learn these things. They're learnable, and then you can apply them within your own life. And nature and all this beauty that's around us is a good place to be able to experience some of that, you know, but also in your work too. Meaningful work is right at the top of the list, you know, so a good balance between these nice, healthy ways of getting exercise and relaxing our mind, being in nature, and then also good meaningful work and doing work that's meaningful to you and gives you fulfillment. And they're two of the main places you're going to spend your life. And if you choose, you know, to avoid some of the other less productive places to times to spend your life, and your artwork and music and those kinds of things can be also tremendously beneficial mentally. And then, you know, you might also find those to also be dependent on what you want to do, even professional things that you might do in some form or fashion. But whatever they are, just remember that you look the happiness and success in the most true sense, not success in the way that everybody wants you to give them money to call that success, but success in life, peaceful and calmness, and passing. And part of the success is passing along good lessons, and so that the next generation can live a happier, more meaningful life as well. That's an important part of success. So yeah, I love you.